Hello and welcome to the Capital City Beads Studio. In this video, we will create a pair of classic beaded fringe earrings using 3 different colors of size 11 Miyuki Delicas seed beads. For this design, I used 2 different types of thread starting with 4-pound or 6-pound fireline. Fireline is a stiffer, more rigid material and comes in 2 colors, crystal or smoke. I'm going to use crystal for this color combo. The second thread you will need is Nymo size B. This is a softer thread we will use to create our flowy fringe. You will also need a size 10 or size 12 beading needle. Either works great with Delicas. Size 12 is thinner and sometimes necessary if using smaller seed beads or beads with a smaller hole. You'll also need a pair of scissors to cut and trim your thread. For findings, you can use any ear wire you like. I'm using a French hook. You will also need a pair of wire protectors. These are optional. I will show you how to attach your ear wire with and without a wire protector. We're going to start off with about 4 feet of fireline. Add more if you plan to make a larger design. Thread your needle onto one side of the thread. We will not be doubling up our thread. To thread your needle, hide the very tip of your thread between your pointer finger and your thumb. Pull it back till you can only see a speck and lay the eye of your needle right onto the speck and gently push it through. If you are struggling to get the fire line into the eye of the needle, you can flatten the end by smashing it with a chain nose plier. We're going to leave about a 5-inch tail here at the end so we can secure and tie off our thread later. We're going to start off by building the top triangle piece, keeping it super simple with one solid color. We'll be building from the bottom of the triangle to the top where the ear wire is. Start by picking up 4 beads. Slide the beads all the way down to the end of your thread, leaving that 5-inch tail. Holding onto the tail, bring the needle around and pass it through the opposite end of the first 2 beads where the tail is sticking out. Pull all the way through. Your beads should now be stacked side by side. Your tail and your working thread should be coming out of the same column. Pass your needle through the beads to the right, the beads that your tail and thread are not coming out of. Pull all the way through and tighten. Your tail should be on the left and your working thread should be on the right. We need to secure this first set of beads so that they do not move around while we build our triangle. To do this, we pass our needle through all of them again. Go up through the left column of beads, pull all the way through, and back down through the right column of beads, and pull all the way through. Before adding our next set of beads, make sure the 2 columns are tight and secure. Delicas are flat on the sides where the holes are, and they should lay pretty flush. Sometimes this takes a little wiggling. To continue building the bottom row of our triangle, you're going to pick up 2 beads. Pass your needle through the top of the last set of beads, the opposite hole from where the thread is already coming out. Pull all the way through till the 2 new beads are stacked up in line next to the previous column. Your thread should now be coming out of the bottom of the middle column of beads. We need to get our thread back to the end of the row so that we can add our next set of beads. To do this, pass your needle back up through the last 2 beads you just added. Pull nice and tight and make sure they're lined up. Repeat this step, adding 2 beads at a time. Pick up 2 beads and pass your needle through the bottom hole of the previous column, the opposite end of where your thread is coming out. Pull all the way through till the 2 new beads are stacked up in line next to the previous column. Pass your needle down the top hole of the last column of beads to get in position to add 2 more. Make sure your 2 new beads are lined up and tightened. You can use your needle to help wiggle and straighten them out. Continue adding 2 beads at a time using this same technique until you have 13 columns of beads. For tapered fringe designs, you need an odd number of columns so that the middle fringe can be the longest. Go ahead and hit pause and come back when you have 13 columns of beads. Once you come to the end of the row, double check that you have all 13 columns before you continue. I've made this mistake before and had to cut up my earrings. Before you continue building the triangle, you need to secure the last 2 beads the same way we secured the first 2 we started with. Pass your needle up through the second to last column of beads, pull all the way through, and then pass your needle back down through the last column of beads. I'm going to flip my row over so that my thread is coming out of the top. If you look at the holes on the top row, you can see that the thread creates little bridges between the beads. We're going to use these little bridges to hook and connect our beads for the next row. This is where we begin using the brick stitch technique. This next part is a little tricky, but it's my favorite way to make sure the thread does not show on the sides of the beads. We will use the same technique every time we start a new row. Pick up 4 beads. Look at the top of the holes and locate the second bridge. This is the bridge between the second and third bead from the end of our base row. Pass your needle under the second bridge. You're not going to be going in any bead holes, just under the thread bridge. Pull your needle all the way through. Your 4 new beads should be stacked up on top of the base row. Pass your needle back up through the 2 beads on the left. Make sure you don't accidentally go back under the bridge or your brick will not stitch. Pull your thread nice and tight before moving on to the next step. The first 2 beads on the end of this row are not lined up correctly. We need to pull them in by passing our needle down through those last 2 beads. Coming out of the bottom hole of the last column, pass your needle back up through the left column so that we're in position to add our next 2 beads. This should pull that right column in so that it's lined up nicely. These first 2 columns should be sitting nicely side by side, and you'll start to see that taper coming from the bottom of the triangle. We're going to continue adding beads 2 at a time using the brick stitch technique. Pick up 2 beads. Pass your needle under the next bridge. This is the bridge between the 3rd and the 4th beads on our base row. Pull your thread all the way through. Pass your needle back up through the beads you just added. Make sure you don't accidentally go back under the bridge. Pull all the way through to secure those 2 beads. We are going to repeat this same process of adding 2 beads at a time for the rest of the row. Pick up 2 beads. Pass your needle under the next thread bridge. Pull your needle all the way through so that your beads are lined up in the row. Go back up through those 2 new beads to secure. Repeat these steps, adding 2 new beads and securing them on the thread bridges until you've come to the end of this row. Go ahead and hit pause and come back when you've completed this second row. Now that the second row is complete, it's time to add the third row. We're going to start with 4 beads. Locate the second bridge, the bridge between the second and third bead from the end of our second row. Pass your needle under the second bridge. You're not going to go in any beads, just under the thread bridge. Gently pull your needle all the way through. Your beads should be stacked up on top of the row below. Pass your needle back up through the 2 beads on the right. Pull your thread tight before moving on to the next step. Secure these 4 beads on the end by passing your needle down the beads on the far left and back up the beads on the right. We're going to continue adding 2 beads at a time using the brick stitch technique. Pick up 2 beads. Pass your needle under the next bridge. This is the bridge between the 3rd and the 4th beads on our 2nd row. Pull your thread all the way through and pass your needle back up through the beads you just added. Pull all the way through and tighten to secure. Pick up 2 more beads and pass your needle under the next bridge. Pull all the way through so your beads are lined up in a row and go back up through those 2 new beads to secure. Repeat this step, adding 2 new beads and securing until you've come to the end of this row. Continue building your triangle until you've come to the top row with 3 columns of beads. Go ahead and hit pause and come back when you've completed the triangle. Now that we're at the top, we need to create a loop to hook our ear wire into. You can do this with beads or a wire protector. To create a loop with beads, you need to string on 6 beads. Pass your needle down the column on the right. At this point, you would secure your thread with half-hitch knots, which I will show shortly. I'm not going to tie off this beaded loop because for this design, I'm going to use a wire protector to attach my ear wire. This creates a metal barrier between my thread and my earring finding and gives the design a nice clean look. Wire protectors look like tiny little horseshoes. Before I attach the wire protector, I like to size it to my earring. You can gently pull it apart with your fingers to open up the horseshoe to line up with the outer bead columns on the top of the triangle. Once you're happy with the spacing, you can attach the wire protector. Pass your needle up one side of the horseshoe and down the other side, making sure your needle and thread are passing through the holes of the wire protector so that it is secure. There is nothing covering the top of the wire protector, so you need to gently pull your thread tight, making sure it stays in that top channel. It is possible for your thread to come out of the top. Pull gently and position your thread so that it stays inside the horseshoe. Pass your needle down the right column of beads to attach the wire protector to your earring. This part of the earring is going to get the most action. We need to reinforce this wire protector so that our earring attachment is strong and secure. To do this, we're going to pass our needle through the wire protector again. First, we need to tie a knot. Pass your needle between the 1st and 2nd column of beads on the 2nd row. Do not go in any bead holes, just between them. The needle is positioned under that 1st column of beads on the top of the triangle and between those 2 columns of beads on that 2nd row, not in any bead holes. Don't pull your thread all the way through. We're going to tie a hitch knot to secure our thread. Gently pull your thread until there's a small loop. Pass your needle through the loop that your thread creates. Pull slowly and secure that hitch knot between the beads. If you see your thread crossing over the beads, you're not in the right place. Pass your needle back under that same bridge for extra security and pull all the way through. We are now going to go up and around the horseshoe to secure the other side. Go back up through the top column of beads and that side of the horseshoe. If you cannot do this in one pass, go through the beads and pull, then go through the horseshoe. This should be pretty tight, so you might have to wiggle it around a little to get into the wire protector. Pull all the way through and pass your needle down the opposite side of the horseshoe and column of beads. Make sure your thread stays in that top channel of the horseshoe and doesn't slip out while you're tightening. I go really slow and watch the top to make sure that my thread stays in place. We're going to tie this off with a knot the same way we did on the other side. Go between the beads on the end and slowly pull your thread until you see the loop. Don't pull your thread all the way through. Pass your needle through the loop your thread creates and gently pull to tighten the knot between the beads. To finish off this thread, pass your needle down the far right columns of beads. Make sure you're only going through the 2 beads on the far side. You don't want to cross over to any other beads or your thread will show. I go down 2 beads and pull tight, go down 2 more beads and pull tight. You should only be in the beads on the very end. Tie another hitch knot on the side to secure your thread. Pass your needle under the beads and gently pull your thread through. Before you pull all the way, pass your needle through the loop it creates and tighten the knot between the beads. Pass your needle down through a few more columns of beads on the end to secure the tail. Using sharp scissors, trim your thread as close to the beads as possible. Before we can add our fringe, we need to secure our tail from the beginning. We're going to do this the same way we just tied off our working thread. We're going to weave that tail back into the triangle and secure it with a hitch knot. Thread your needle onto the tail. Your tail should be coming out of the bottom corner of beads. Pass your needle up through the beads directly next to it, the beads on the left. Then, pass your needle up through the beads on the far right column of the second row, positioning your thread on the side of the triangle to tie your knot. Tie a hitch knot by passing your needle under the beads and pull your thread gently but not all the way through. Pass your needle through the loop your thread creates to tie a hitch knot. Gently tighten the knot between the beads. Go up a few more columns of beads to secure the tail and trim with scissors. Now we're ready to add our fringe. To add the fringe, we need to tie on a new piece of thread. I like to use Nymo size B. It's super soft and creates beautiful flowy fringe. The color doesn't really matter, you only see it a little bit on the very tip of the fringe. The purple beads are going to be on the tips of my fringe, so I'm using a mauve color to blend in. We're going to cut 8 feet of thread. This is a lot of thread to work with and may seem hard to manage, but with a little practice, it does get easier. Make sure your workspace is completely clear. Put away all tools, coffee cups, pens, etc., so you have a very clear workspace. You don't want your thread to hook or catch on anything. This helps prevent unwanted knots and tangles. Cut 8 feet of thread. Thread your needle onto one end. Nymo tends to fray a little on the ends. Use a sharp scissor for a clean cut. Really hide that tip of the thread between your fingertips to help get the thread in the eye of the needle. We are not doubling up this thread. We need to secure our thread onto the triangle and then move our needle down through the beads so we're coming out of the bottom hole down here on the far right. Tie the thread onto the triangle by locating the 3rd row from the bottom of the triangle. Stick your needle between the 1st and 2nd column of beads on the 3rd row. We're going to tie a knot right above the last column of beads on the 3rd row. Pull your needle all the way through, leaving a 5-inch tail. Tie a double knot with the 5-inch tail and the longer working thread. Tighten your knot really slowly so that it tightens between the beads. You should not see any thread crossing over your beads. Before moving forward, we need to tie off that 5-inch tail so we can get it out of our way. Thread your needle onto the tail. Pass your needle up a few columns of beads and tie a hitch knot on the side. This is the same technique we used to tie off our fire line. Pass your needle between the beads, and before pulling all the way through, stick your needle back down the loop it creates and tighten the knot gently between the beads. Go through a few more columns and trim off the excess tail with your sharp scissors. To position your thread for the fringe, pass it down all of the beads on the side of the triangle until you're coming out of the far corner of the triangle. Go through one column at a time and pull your thread all the way through each time to prevent knots. If you see any thread crossing over your beads, that means you missed a bead. You need to follow a straight path to the bottom. Now that we're coming out of the bottom corner of this triangle, we can begin stringing our fringe. I have typed up the bead counts in the description of this video. Starting with our main color, the same color we used for our triangle, color A, string on 3 beads. Alternate between color A and color B 6 times. Add 6 color B. Alternate between color B and color C 6 times. Add 6 color C. Double check your bead counts and push the beads all the way up to the triangle. Move the very last bead down and out of your way. Skipping that very last bead, pass your needle back up through all of the beads you just strung on. You probably won't be able to go through all of them at once, so pass through a few and push them down, pass through a few more and push them down till you've come to the top. Make sure you don't skip a bead or you're going to see your thread crossing over that bead. Make sure you get in all the bead holes. To secure this fringe, pass your needle up through the 2 beads we are coming out of on the bottom row of the triangle, just the 2 beads on that bottom row. Pull your thread all the way through and hold on to the very last bead of your fringe. Pulling in opposite directions will tighten your fringe and cinch the beads up to the triangle. Pull tight until there's no slack. Adjust the tension of your beads so that your beads lay flat. This takes some wiggling and lots of practice. If you pull too tight, your beads will be too stiff and wonky. If you don't pull tight enough, you'll see thread at the base of the triangle. Work with it a little to get it just right before moving on to the next fringe. To get your needle in position for the next fringe, simply pass it down through the next column of beads. Pull your thread all the way through and string on the next sequence. The only difference between the first fringe and the second one is adding 2 beads to the first set of color A and 2 beads to the last set of color C. This will elongate your fringe while maintaining the same pattern in the middle. I'm just loosening the tension on my first fringe a little before moving on to my next one. For the second fringe, string on 5, color A. Then you'll alternate between color A and color B 6 times. Add 6, color B. Alternate between color B and color C 6 times. Add 8, color C. You can find these numbers and bead counts in the description of this video. Double check your counts and push the beads all the way up to the triangle. Move the very last bead down and out of your way. Skipping that very last bead, pass your needle back up through all of the beads you just strung on. As the fringe get longer, you won't be able to do this in one pass, so it's okay to do a little at a time. Once you've come to the top of your fringe, go through the 2 beads that we're coming out of on the last row of the triangle. Holding on to the last bead of your fringe, pull the needle and fringe in opposite directions to tighten. Adjust your tension so that your beads are laying flat and they're not too tight or too loose. Pass your needle down through the next column of beads and string on your third fringe, adding 2 beads to the top color A and 2 beads to the bottom color C. Continue adding fringe until you get to the middle and have completed 7 strands. Go ahead and hit pause and come back when you've completed your 7th strand. Now that you've made it to the middle, it's time to start decreasing our beads as we go up to the other side. Color A will have 13 beads and color C will have 16 beads. Continue adding fringe using the same technique and decrease color A and color C by 2 beads until you've come to the end and have added all of the fringe. Go ahead and hit pause and come back when you've completed all of your fringe. Your earring is almost done. All we have left to do is tie off our thread. You should be an expert at this part by now. Pass your needle up through the outer edge of the triangle. Go through a few columns and tie a hitch knot between the beads. To tie a hitch knot, pass your needle between the beads and before pulling all the way through, stick your needle back down the loop it creates and tighten the knot gently between the beads. Go through a few more columns and tie another hitch knot. Pass your needle through a few more beads to secure the tail and trim off the excess. The last thing you need to do is add the ear wire to the wire protector. I'm using a French hook that just gently opens and pinches closed. Some ear wires you may need to twist open the loop using a chain nose plier. Make the other earring and enjoy! Have so much fun playing with this design. The possibilities are endless. We have tons of colors for you to choose from at capitalcitybeads.com. Click the link in the description of this video to shop colorful beads and jewelry making supplies. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Capital City Beads for more beaded jewelry inspiration.